Greetings there. Do without will shall be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and this is another lecture on Walk Magick. So today, I thought it'd be a cool concept to dive into. I'm going to be talking about basic colors, shapes, and numbers in a occult, symbolic manner. So let me give an introduction to this, right? The universe surrounding the individual, we are able to perceive and interact with it partly through the mind and partly through the senses. Here I'm referring only to the main five senses, barring the sixth, which is the psychic sense. It's more like what you'd call intuition. These five senses pick up light through the eyes and nerve endings. You experience sensations through touch, through vibration. This allows our brain to interpret what we see and feel through colors and shapes, for instance. We could also measure the external world with mathematical calculations. Now, all of these physical sciences have limitations. They must be able to be interacted with through objective observations, meaning that anyone with average and functional five senses can agree in terms that they observe the same thing. Now, in the occult sciences, this is a way more subjective field of study, and so how do we explain this universe surrounding us through the occult sciences? Well, we've long applied symbolic natures to the classes of colors, shapes, and numbers, and this allows one to understand the universe from a higher perspective than one can know it through physics. For instance, through physics, we use dimensions. Height, width, depth, those are the first three. The fourth dimension is time. Now, the body itself is a three-dimensional object. It's height, width, and depth. The mind, however, does allow us to interact with things in a four-dimensional realm of space-time. We're able to perceive time, this height, depth, and width going through space as events happen in a series, moving forward in a linear fashion. I listened to a lecture by Christopher Hyatt some years back, and I don't remember everything that he said, but one thing that stuck with me on this topic of dimensions, and I don't necessarily know how true it is, so take it with a grain of salt, but he was using in his occult experiments back, probably in the late 80s, early 90s, space-time dimensions, and he said something interesting that a 17th dimensional object is a very abstract thing. It's not something that you would be able to perceive, such as a sphere or a cube, or even the tetractys or a four-dimensional cube, for instance, right? But he said that the 17th dimension is what AI computer algorithms use for calculating advertisements. And that just stuck with me, and I think it's interesting that we could use perhaps some technology in the future to further expand our senses and observations of the universe if we could create computers that are more sophisticated in analysis than the brain. I wanted to quote, and this is an article that you could read in the description, and it says, "The 10th dimension is a single point that represents all the possible branches of every possible timeline of all potential universes. To recall string theory, superstrings vibrating in the 10th dimension are what create subatomic particles that can make up not only our universe, but all the universes." So string theory says that there's 10 dimensions of space, and M theory, which I'll not get into, I want to come back to the main topic, but M theory says that there's 11 dimensions of space-time. In a future video, I do plan on giving the philosophical nature of three-dimensional objects or shapes such as spheres, cubes, pyramids, etc. And possibly in a future video beyond that, I might go into even more advanced shapes such as a four-dimensional cube, or I could break down how to use in magic a 17th dimensional shape, which is hyper-connected angles that are not possible on a three-dimensional plane. But for this video, this is like the bare bone foundation that could eventually lead up to that type of study. This is just basic two-dimensional shapes, primary and secondary colors, and the first 10 numbers. So it's just very simple, and maybe we could build up from here. So again, this is all physical science, and physical science again are limited to objectivity. What I want to talk about is very subjective. It's what you perceive. And over the many generations of occult practitioners, we've come to agree that our subjective observations, by applying symbolic natures to such things as colors, shapes, and numbers, and the creating of written letters, or in this case, written numbers, right? The people who were doing that and actually thinking why these numbers should be shaped the way they are when we draw them on a piece of paper, it's because they were putting symbolic natures of the universe into these numbers, all coming back to the creation story, like you would see in Genesis or any mythos, right? Even, if you pick the pagan folklore of any type that has a creation myth, there's always some type of nothingness that was turned into something by some divine entity that we cannot perceive, right? And so let me get into this. So in this video, I'm going to do my best to give you my own philosophical insights of the universe through the symbolic definitions of colors, shapes, and numbers. Thus, when you look at your surroundings, you may be able to interpret a deeper nature of reality than the average person. You may begin to grasp God consciousness. So today, we do not have any means of physical sciences that can intellectually explain in an observational way what was here before the universe and the Big Bang, which is the most agreed upon physical sciences creation story. We can't measure anything that was before space-time, so how do we understand where we came from, how we as humans create, and how do we interpret what's created around us? How do we interpret this universe? Can we see what you would call the light or divinity or God in things around us? And I argue yes. And so this is a very first step into understanding the universe. So I'm going to be using very primary or secondary colors. I'm going to be using the numbers 1 through 10, and I'm going to be using basic shapes, as I'll explain, and I'm going to give you my own symbolic interpretations of them, that if you look around your surroundings and you see the way things are that we've created, or things that are born or created naturally in the universe, they have these shapes and colors, and I believe that there is a symbolic nature to them, that by advanced meditation practices, you can begin to see divinity through these symbolic interpretations of your surroundings. So let me begin with this. I'm going to start with colors, and I wanted to read this quote from 777, and it's in the back. It's one of the notes on column 11. And so this is a note by Crowley on column 11, which is the colors of the Tree of Life, numbers 1 through 10. It says, "These, the colors, may be naturally derived from what has been said about column 11, lines 1 through 10. Scarlet naturally represents the activity of fire, blue the passivity of water, while yellow is the balance between them. Green is the middle color of the spectrum, and therefore the balanced receptacle of the totality of vibration. Observe that the complementary of each of the pair of the colors of the active elements is the third. Thus red and blue make violet, whose contemporary is yellow, and so on. For the citrine, olive, russet, and black of earth, see the explanation under the number 10 Malkuth in the Queen scale, which is column 16. The pure earth, known to the ancient Egyptians, in that equinox of the gods, over Isis presided, was green." So we've actually come back. We went through the Aeon of Isis, the Aeon of Osiris. Now we're in the Aeon of Horus, the child. And it's now green again, which is interesting. It went from green to black to green, earth, and it's reflected in Crowley's Thoth Tarot, where the bottom of the rosy cross went from, according to Crowley, it would have been green back in Isis's time. During Osiris, it was the square of 4 colors, very black. Earth was very dark, in symbolic interpretation. Now again, in the Aeon of Horus, it's green, it's full of life, but green could also mean decay. But let me get into these very simple definitions, in my opinion, of the colors. So the color white, purity, absence of anything, divinity, masculine, the light, and God. White is actually an absence of color, so it's very interesting that we associate this absence, this non-being, with, it's actually repelled everything. There's nothing there, that's why you see it as white. Whereas you'll see later in black, black actually absorbs everything. So that's why we see it as dark. It absorbs light. White repels light, so it's an absence. And yet we call the light God. So this light has a dual nature in a sense of, well, you'll see as I get into black. So the color yellow, solar, thought, electricity, in a sense meaning subtle powering of something such as the nervous system. So electricity such as the nervous system is electricity. And yellow is also sensation. Red is Mars. It's heat, war, power, love in the sense of extreme passion, anger and intensity. Blue, Jupiter, calming, watery, slow but persistent, guided by the knowledge of experience. Orange, Mercury, contemplative, meditative, humbling, capable of motion and stillness, warmth, health, stimulation. Green, Venus, growth of nature and earth, forests and trees wherein animals dwell, regeneration. Purple, moon, wisdom, royalty, mystic, luxurious, ambitious, the mysteries, unconsciousness in its lowest sense. The color brown is earth, durability, growth, stability, solitude or isolation, aloneness, devoid of life but capable of all life is within it. Gray, duality, union of opposites, neutrality, mountains and rock formations, thus long enduring and slow moving, power in a detached state of being. I would also say duality, but in union of opposites, a combined force of white and black, thus. Now the color black is darkness, void, the potential of all things to manifest, all colors, thus all things, melancholia, mysterious, the feminine, not God, the true source of all. So with these, think about them, especially if you're doing a meditation on a symbol and that symbol is colored. You might take these definitions and apply it for an even deeper interpretation of a symbol. But really, when you're working with something like, let's say, Kabbalah, you're looking to interpret nature in a very particular way. By studying nature, you're able to start to see divinity in all things. So if you happen to be meditating on a forest or a tree or its leaves, you start to see the leaves are brown, leaves are green, the tree is brown, the leaves change color through orange. So there's a cycle that's happening, right? As things change color, especially through life cycles and old age or decay. So if you're doing meditations, take these definitions and apply them to your meditations and think about everything that you see around you and why things are colored a certain way and how they affect your consciousness. Shapes. Now, I love symbolic shapes, so this is, to me, one of the coolest, nerdiest things that I could really think about. And so these are simple definitions, but again, I think they're very pertinent to understanding divinity and the universe and yourself as a byproduct. The point, the number one, the first state of being, the smallest measurement, the beginning, God or the light in its highest state. Essentially, it's a very small circle. Its symbolic meaning is very similar to the circle, but it's more primitive and less refined. It's the beginning and the end, Alpha and Omega. The second shape is a line, the number 2, 2 points connected, a point, or the light extended, duality, a journey between two things, 2 points. A spiral, the line, once motion begins, the orbital nature of a star, thus the journey of one's life. Demonstration that nothing is static, Everything is in a perpetual state of motion and change. The chakra move in a spiral manner. Thus, the spiral indicates a healthy spiritual nature. Much like every man and every woman is a star's course is not an exact circle. It's a spiral. It never goes around in exactly a perfect circle. Its orbit, especially like a planet around a star, like the sun, it's elliptical. It is not going to be a perfect circle every single time. It's going to be different each time it goes around the sun, let's say Earth or Saturn. Once it goes around the sun once, its next cycle is going to be in a spiral shape, not an exact circle. The next shape is a circle, and this one is a very important symbol. It's probably the best symbol of union and divinity that I could personally think of. So the circle, everything is a circle. Think about it like this also. In nature, there's no such thing as perfection. If you draw a circle or if you printed out a circle, somewhere on the most minute scale of measurement, there is going to be a point on that circle that is not perfect. It's just the way things are. Nothing is perfect. So anything is circular. The circle is strictly a metaphysical symbol. It's an abstract thing that doesn't actually really exist. It's almost an anomaly. Anyway, so thus a circle is a symbol of divinity, the source of all creation, all that was, is, and ever will be. The universe is ever expanding in all directions. Essentially, it is a sphere that is constantly expanding its circumference to infinity. Planets spin in a circular motion around stars that are also circular. The planets themselves are circular. Take a look at a human being. Our heads, necks, torso, arms, legs, fingers, toes, all circular. Karma works in a circle. An event takes place and a seemingly random series of events follow until the energy returns to where it started, thus completing a cycle. Smaller still, the atomic structure of life. The atom is composed of electrons, neutrons, and protons, all of which are circles revolving around circles. And even smaller than atoms, their building blocks are particles. These tiniest pieces of matter are lines stacked on top of one another with space in between them. It's also been proven that to slice one of the particles and peer into it, you would be staring into a tube of circular shape. Energy manifested as consciousness or living beings is also governed under a circular pattern. A person eats a chicken, the person has kids, the person dies, they're buried or otherwise dissolves into the earth. Worms eat the person, a chicken eats the worm, and the kids eat the chicken. So it's a perfect cycle, a circle. Lastly, on the circle, all shapes are essentially circular based on the fact that all shapes come full round from the starting point back to the starting point. All basic shapes that are geometrically measured have a full 360 degrees. The circle itself is 360 degrees. A square has 4 90-degree corners. 4 times 90 is 360. A triangle has 360-degree corners, but to be properly assessed, must have a line drawn down the center directly from the uppermost point, which gives us 2 90-degree corners at the bottom. So that's 60 times 3 plus 90 times 2, which equals 360. Again, the idea of a perfect circle, a shape in which every part of its circumference measures exactly the same to the centermost point, doesn't really exist. I could give almost a guarantee that in any perfect circle, if you get into the absolute smallest decimal of measurement, somewhere in that circle is not the same as every other point. That is to say that since there is no actual perfect circle, the circle is only symbolic in nature, and in this sense is very much like God. The idea of creation from no thing personified. The triangle. It's the number 3. 3 points connected with 3 lines. Triplicity. It's the mother, father, child. The uniting of opposites to create a third thing. The upward triangle is symbolic of the male principle. The reverse triangle is symbolic of the feminine. The human condition, too, has a triplicity of body, mind, and spirit. Up until now, the triangle, circle, and spiral, and line and point have all been symbols of spiritual nature. The square. It's the number 4, physicality, physical manifestation. The spirit has condensed into matter. The square is a perfect symbol of law, control, and governance. The square is a great symbol for Earth. The circle, divided into 4 sections, represents Earth as the 4 elements. It's the equilateral cross, thus the union of female and male in its lowest sense. The pentagram, it's the number 5, the 4 elements plus spirit, the symbol of humankind, microcosmic nature. Lastly, in shapes on this section, I'm going to talk about the hexagram very briefly. So the hexagram is the number 6. It's the 6 classical planets of astrology surrounding the 7th planet, the sun. The union of 2 triangles, male and female. So now I'm going to give brief definitions of the first 10, technically 11 numbers, including the number 0. So to begin, 0. Its symbol is no thing. It's the first true number. It's the source of all, thus pan, pangenitor, panphage. It's void, absolute beginning. The shape of the number 0 is a circle, thus everything symbolized previously about the point and the circle is attributed to the number 0. 0 is the perfect symbol for the Tao Te. Number 1. The first emanation from the source, the light and divine being above all. By shape, the number 1 corresponds with all that symbolized by the shape of the line, especially duality in union. The number 1 is simply the Tao. The number 2, the manifestation of female and male, the archetype for both the spiritual realm and the physical realm. 2 things allow for union. 0 equals 2, being negative 1 plus positive 1 equals 0. 2 opposites unite to obliterate each other. The yin and yang, much like the Tao Te, only deviation by a minor degree from the state of union they were in formerly. Number 3. By the union of opposites in the previous numbers, a third thing is created. Goddess plus God equals the universe. Female plus male equals child. The mystic number of the sun is 3, because the summation of 1 plus 2 plus 3 equals 6. Thus Saturn, which corresponds with 3, is secretly beyond the sun. It's the potential for manifestation. The number 3 is shaped with 2 half circles stacked. By shape, it is half of the infinity symbol, or by connecting the 2 halves, a circle is made, implying that within the number 3 is union. The number 4. The number corresponds with the square in all things manifest, of matter and law. Even its shape is very much like a square. It is a very orderly number. It holds the 4 elements. Its mystical number is 10 by sigma 4. Thus the square connects with Earth. This makes a lot of sense considering that the number 10 is Earth, the house of the 4 elements, which 4 also has in common. And the number 5, the number of the human body, which houses the 5 elements, earth, air, water, fire, and spirit. The shape of the number 5 is unique. It is part square and part circle, implying that things correspond with the number 5, such as the human body, have the chance to attain the perfect unity of matter and spirit. The number 6. 6 is Sol, thus solar consciousness, implies man enlightened. Its shape consists of a circle with an upward line, which to my mind reflects man reaching towards or aspiring towards the heavens. The number 7, simply Venus, divine love, agape. The number 8, Mercury. 2 circles connected, the union of micro and macro in an intellectual symbolic fashion. It is the same shape as the symbol for infinity. Mercury is fast-moving, ever-present, much like divinity is omnipresent. The number 9, Moon, unconsciousness. A circle pointing down describes the epic formula of a hero's descent to the underworld. This is man probing their unconscious depths for understanding of their nature. And lastly, the number 10, manifestation. The first complete cycle, 1 and 0 in union. Though removed from its former state, it is now clothed in duality. Thus 10 is composed of 2 digits rather than 1. So these are, like I said, just definitions and points of meditation. You could download a copy of this script and use any of these points for your own meditations if it pleases you. Take a look at them yourself. And I really do hope that this helps people somewhat new to the past, or that may have gotten so far and, coming back to the basics sometimes kicks up something amazing after you've studied a lot. So if this brings somebody well advanced back to the basics in a positive manner, I hope that it helps them too. So I'm going to end this right here, and I hope that my points are agreeable, they're enlightening and helpful. So love is the law, love under will. Cheers.